The ordeal of the three Britons lasted 5 hours. They were ambushed as they left the Foreign Ministry in the centre of Buenos Aires in a taxi.
And as we pulled away, one car just slipped out in front of us, another one immediately behind us. And I got out of our car to see what was going on, and was immediately grabbed by one of the people from the other car and bundled into it. When I tried to pull away, he pulled a gun on me and forced me into the car.
And then what happened?
Well, what then happened was what one might describe as, I think I could describe as probably the most unpleasant, the most terrifying experience that I've ever had. It was an experience in which on at least 3 occasions I felt that my life was in acute danger. We were in the custody of armed men, possessing official equipment, driving in official cars, appointed to do an official task by a particular interest group within this country. We were released in a state of extreme nervousness, practically stark naked, in the middle of the countryside, a remote part of the countryside outside Buenos Aires, at a moment where I personally was still wondering what exactly was going to happen to us. We walked away, and fortunately nothing did happen.
Julian, did
and then what? How did you get back to town? Just give us a few details.
Well, we flagged down some farmers who were driving by in a pickup truck. I mean, it was in the middle of farmland. It was nowhere near anywhere. We flagged down some farmers. They were very nervous. I mean, you can imagine that in this situation, the sight of 3 virtually naked Englishmen is, to say the least, startling for the average Argentinian farmer.
The Argentine Interior Minister has ordered an investigation into the abduction of the 3 Britons. Those responsible, it's officially claimed, attempting to discredit or destabilise the government. This morning, a police guard had been provided outside the hotel where about 500 foreign journalists are staying. After his release, Manyon met the Argentine President, General Galtieri, who indicated there's no real change in the hardline policy of Argentine sovereignty over the Falkland Islands.
I think I asked him 3 times whether or not he was prepared to enter into what we in Britain would know as open negotiations, in which the result is not predetermined before you sit down at the table. I received replies that I would describe as both cordial and evasive. It is still not clear to me exactly what the Argentine position is. I'm not sure ultimately it is quite clear to them. What is clear is that they are still very much committed to sovereignty over the islands. I personally believe there has been a little bit of movement, but not a great deal.
President Galtieri then is still prepared to fight on?
He stated that quite openly, yes. I mean, that was part of the message. Yes, he will fight if, as he put it, the British attack us.
How confident, though, is he of the Argentine forces being able to resist British attacks?
As you know very well, every government minister in this country expresses the greatest confidence in their forces' ability to resist our fleet. The proof, as they say, will be in the eating.
The incident which immediately preceded the abduction of the 3 Britons was outside the Argentine Foreign Ministry. As the minister, Nicanor Costa Méndez, arrived, he was jostled by waiting newsmen and appeared angered by this. Security men checked the credentials of the British television crew, and they were intercepted as they later left the ministry building.
Are we near a settlement today?
What then happened was what one might describe as, I think I could describe as probably the most unpleasant, the most terrifying experience that I've ever had. It was an experience in which on at least 3 occasions I felt that my life was in acute danger, and in which really one did not know how the whole situation was going to end. I don't at this point want to go into too many details about what happened because the government here, for one reason, has expressed immense concern about this, wishes to explain it to us personally, and therefore I wish to hear what they have to say before I make any full
Do you have
statement
any
about it.
idea who it was that picked you up?
Yes, I have myself a fairly clear idea of who it was, but again, I wish to discuss this with the Interior Minister before I talk about it.
What sort of treatment did you have?
Why do you think your life was in danger?
For the fairly simple reason that a cocked .45 automatic pistol was placed against my head for most of the time I was in their custody.
Did they give you any reason at all why they picked you up?
I can't really go into that too far. They didn't give a precise reason. They indicated to me that they knew who I was, but I wasn't really clear as to whether that was the full reason.
And then, later on, we were asked to take our clothes off, and they took all the rings and our money, and they stripped off to nothing. And then they brought out a rifle, and they pointed it at us and said to walk down the road. And one had to turn your back on the rifle and walk away from it. And I guess that's quite scary.
What were you thinking then?
I'd seen it a few times in the movies, I guess, or something, and I just wonder what people like that felt. And sort of we know now, you know. But it was tough.
Julian es el periodista, es una persona. Manyon, pleasure to meet you, and, ¿cómo se dice? Excuse. Por lo tanto, les reitero a ustedes y a todo el periodismo, les reitero a ustedes y a todo el periodismo, extranjero y argentino, las excusas del gobierno y del pueblo argentino, que sé que en esto también, como en el caso de las Malvinas, nos acompaña.
And I reiterate not only to the foreign but to the Argentine press the apologies of the government and the people of Argentina that I know that same as in the Malvinas case, back us on this.
Gracias por la labor que están realizando todos,
Thank you for the task that you're carrying out. I'll follow you.
por la objetividad,
For the objectivity,
por la intervención del periodismo como contribución a la paz entre los hombres.
and for the participation of journalism as a contribution to peace among men.
Gracias, Julian.
Yes. Could I take this opportunity of...
Now an acting press officer carries Captain Enrique de Leon of Argentine Naval Intelligence, now an acting press officer, carries the latest communique from the military junta to read to waiting journalists. This is the equivalent of the Ministry of Defense briefings in London. Far from the scene of the battle and banned from southern Argentina, the 700 foreign journalists accredited here can only record what is officially being said without the ability to cross-check. In the government-run press room, correspondents can pick up transcripts of the communique and study the reports carried by the official news agency Telam and Soperiti, the wire service that's owned by the Argentine army. In the same way as Britain has refused to allow foreign journalists to travel with the British fleet, only Argentine correspondents are on the Falklands. The television channels in Argentina are controlled by the military, and there's no means of knowing how highly colored or censored these Argentine accounts of the situation are. Foreign television crews can only record the battle and the consequences of it as shown in Argentina. Argentine newspapers are giving the crisis massive coverage. Some of them are independent and have in the past been fiercely critical of the government. In present circumstances, though, they're adopting an intensely patriotic tone. In theory, all overseas news is censored, but in practice there are no censors in the newsrooms, and newspapers carry daily accounts from London. The political attacks on the way the British media is reporting the war is also getting coverage, though ironically, in Buenos Aires, the BBC is accused of being too pro-British. Foreign correspondents here share a sense of frustration at not being allowed closer to the battle, but share too the belief that the world wants to hear the Argentine version of the conflict, however unpleasant or unreal it may appear to people in Britain.
The Argentine ship Belgrano have now been rescued. That would mean about 400 remain unaccounted for if the figures the government gave out here on the number of crew aboard are correct.
Could I take this opportunity of asking the President a couple of questions?
Buena oportunidad periodística. Buena oportunidad periodística. Muy buen periodista, señor.
Very good.
There are just really three questions I'd like to ask. In the interest of objectivity, who, sir, do you believe was responsible for this attack upon us?
En el interés de la objetividad, ¿quién cree usted, señor presidente, que fue responsable de este ataque contra nosotros?
Contra...
Yes.
Vea. Creo que debe ser un grupo muy reducido,
I think it's a very small group
que no está buscando o contribuyendo al objetivo de la paz.
that is not contributing to the objective of peace.
Could I ask you, how is the cause of peace, if one could put it in those terms
¿Cómo
at the moment?
se encuentra en este momento la causa de la paz,
What-
señor presidente, y
What chances are there
¿Cuáles son las
now of a negotiated
posibilidades
settlement, in your opinion,
de un
of this
acuerdo
war?
negociado a vuestro juicio y en este momento?
No voy a hacer la historia del siglo pasado y de este siglo, de los hechos que motivaron a la nación argentina a tomar las decisiones que tomó en el mes de abril.
I will not go back to the history of last century and this century, which was the reason for the Argentine to take the decision it did on the 2nd of April.
Ustedes las conocen bien.
You know it quite well.
Mientras hay diálogo, mientras hay canales de comunicación entre ambos gobiernos, siempre hay posibilidad de lograr una solución honorable para ambas partes.
While there is a possibility of communication, of interchange of opinion between both governments, there is always a possibility of an honorable solution for both parties.
La República Argentina tiene vocación de llegar a una solución no militar al problema.
The Argentine Republic has a vocation to reach a solution even though it not be military.
Sin embargo, si la Gran Bretaña sigue usando con mayor intensidad sus medios militares,
If Great Britain, however, continues using to a greater scale its military power,
la Argentina está espiritualmente y militarmente preparada para responder.
Argentina is spiritually and military ready to answer.
Is Argentina prepared to drop the insistence on sovereignty in order to get peace?
La insistencia sobre la soberanía con tal de obtener la paz.
La soberanía argentina, que la estamos reclamando desde 1833,
Argentine sovereignty, which we're claiming and asking for since 1833,
siempre es, fue, es y será objetivo del pueblo de la nación argentina.
has, is, and will always be the objective of the Argentine people.
No vamos a renunciar a ese objetivo.
We will not give up this objective.
Podemos conversar para buscar ese objetivo en un plazo razonable.
We can have a talk to seek this objective within a reasonable time limit,
Pero no 149 años más.
but not 149 years more.
But the real question, sir, is whether
auténtica, señor presidente, es
you are prepared to enter into negotiations
a entrar en negociaciones
which might
que
not
puedan
necessarily lead to
obligatoriamente
sovereignty.
llevar a la
for
soberanía
Argentina.
para la Argentina.
In other words, completely
sea,
open negotiations, which
A
might end
negociaciones abiertas,
in either direction,
sin preconceptos, que puedan terminar en cualquier dirección.
either sovereignty for Argentina
A
or even sovereignty for
soberanía
Britain.
para Argentina, aún soberanía para Gran Bretaña.
Are you prepared to enter into those negotiations?
Es muy larga la reflexión, Esteban
Perdón, pregunta del periodista, señor presidente. Si de entablarse negociaciones en mano a mano, ¿estaría la Argentina dispuesta a considerar la posibilidad de mantener la soberanía argentina, inclusive de cedérsela momentáneo definitivamente a Estados Unidos, con tal de que se pueda asegurar y mantener la paz?
¿Estados Unidos?
Gran Bretaña.
No, acá está un poco confuso esto. Yo me gustaría,
Can you repeat the question?
John,
I'm sorry.
si puede equivocar la contestación,
don't want to make a
usted
wrong
me
no.
pregunte mal.
The normal definition of
La definición
negotiations
normal de negociaciones, señor presidente,
is a situation in
es
which
una
two
situación en la
sides
cual
sit down,
ambas partes se sientan ante una mesa
not knowing what the final result will necessarily
sin
be.
saber cuál será la conclusión final desde un principio.
Are you prepared to hold
¿Está
those
usted
kind of talks with Britain?
preparado para llevar a cabo ese tipo de discusiones?
Sí, señor.
Yes, sir.
Reconociendo la habilidad diplomática histórica de la Gran Bretaña, que la reconocemos porque es toda una historia,
Recognizing the British diplomatic ability, because we do so because it's a historical ability.
también nosotros, que somos buenos alumnos,
We that are good pupils,
estamos en condiciones de sentarnos a la mesa diplomáticamente
we can also sit at the table diplomatically
para acordar los puntos de vista que, buscando la paz,
to agree upon the viewpoints, diplomatic views, that in looking for peace
nos lleven a lograr lo que desde 1833 está buscando la Argentina.
will enable us to find what since 1833 Argentina is seeking for.
So, sir, are you actually prepared
O sea,
to
que
pull
usted está
down the
dispuesto,
Argentine flag
señor
on the
presidente,
islands in order to
Arriar
get
la
those
bandera argentina de las
negotiations started?
Malvinas para que comiencen las negociaciones y llegaría a ese extremo?
No, señor.
No sé.
So that really is the sticking point.
O sea, este es el problema álgido.
Creo que se puede conversar, señor.
It can be talked upon.
How near are we to war?
Porque hay otras formas también de diría yo, de facilitar al gobierno de Gran Bretaña una solución aceptable, honorable para su país.
Because there are also other ways to facilitate honorable means of a solution to Great Britain. La última pregunta era, señor presidente, ¿hasta qué punto están ustedes decididos si hace falta ir a la guerra?
No hay duda de que si Gran Bretaña ataca, nos va a obligar a responder con todos los medios.
No doubt, if Great Britain attacks, we shall have to answer with all the means at our disponibility.
Do you believe that Great Britain is about to attempt to retake the
Gran
islands?
Bretaña está por atacar, por reconquistar las Malvinas?
Creo que se está preparando para atacar.
I think it is getting ready to attack.
Es la decisión política del gobierno de Gran Bretaña de realizar o no el ataque en los próximos días.
It is the political decision of the government of Great Britain to carry out or not the attack in the forthcoming days.
What you seem to be suggesting, sir, is that you are prepared to help Mrs. Thatcher get off the hook.
¿Cómo puede ayudar usted a que la señora Thatcher baje un poco del pedestal?
What if what she really wants is
Si
not
lo que ella
to get off the
realmente
hook,
quiere no es bajar del pedestal,
but to win back the islands she
sino
believes
recuperar
are
la
hers?
isla que ella cree que son británicas? ¿Qué le aconsejaría?
A mí me agradaría que la señora Thatcher hablara con la comunidad inglesa que ha vivido muchos años en la Argentina.
I would like Mrs. Thatcher to have a conversation with the British community that has lived for many years in Argentina.
No sugiero que hable conmigo.
I'm not suggesting she talk with me.
Creo que hablar con sus compatriotas que han convivido en esta nación y se han desarrollado, muchos de ellos tienen hijos, largos años de convivencia argentina y desarrollado en una comunidad, su vida, su familia, su way of life.
I'm suggesting that she speak with her compatriots who have sons that have born here, who have enjoyed the way of life, developed the way, and shared the way of life.
Creo que es la mejor aproximación de la realidad que creo que la señora Thatcher y cierto sector de la comunidad inglesa desconoce.
I think that Mrs. Thatcher and a certain part of the British community do not know this part of the story which we would like her to know.
Buena interview.
Good interview.
Muy buen periodista.
Good, you're very good
Aprovechó la
journalist.
circunstancia. Espero que no tengan mi deseo ferviente y así voy a tomar medidas que no tengan más dificultades.
It is my fervent desire, and I shall take the necessary measures, that you have no more difficulties of this type.
No solamente ustedes, sino todo el periodismo.
Can you,
Not only you, but all journalism.
so can you,
Puede
if I could
usted,
ask you just
señor
one last question,
Presidente, última pregunta,
can
perdón.
you offer the same
The
guarantees?
last.
The last. Can you
¿Puede
offer the
usted
same
ofrecer las mismas
guarantees
garantías
to the islanders who may
a
have
los
to live
isleños
under
de
Argentine
las
rule?
Malvinas
Will
que
they be
deban
safe
vivir
from the
bajo
harassment that we've
el
endured today,
régimen
from the dangers we've endured
argentino?
today?
Van a estar libres del peligro que hemos sufrido nosotros.
Sure. Yeah. No. Is that all right?
Julian, can you say anything more today about... Can you say anything more today about the identity of your kidnappers?
I have no proof of who the kidnappers were. I can only say that they were professionals. They carried out the kidnapping in a way that indicated they had kidnapped many people before in their lives. I can also say that they were, throughout the episode, in radio communication with somebody else. They had a radio in the car, and that they behaved throughout like people, in my opinion, who had either had or had some connection with the security forces of this country.
And what have been the results of your nightly talks with the Inner Minister, the Minister of Interior Affairs, and Galtieri himself?
Well, could I say that from the point of view of all our relations with the senior members of the government, they have been of extremely cordial nature, and that as soon as the Interior Minister realised what had happened to us, he sent his own personal car and chauffeur to the police station where we were being held after we had ourselves struggled out of the countryside where we'd been abandoned. We were then taken to the presidential palace to meet first the Interior Minister and then the President himself. These two gentlemen assured me in the most profuse terms that their government had nothing to do with this event. They apologised in really the fullest possible sense for what had happened. They assured us that both we and other foreign journalists here would be protected to the maximum of the government's abilities. And in those circumstances, I have no alternative but to accept what they say, that this was not a government action against journalists. It was done by people who are perhaps not entirely under the control of the government.
Have any news emerged as far as the negotiations go?
Well, we spoke in some detail with President Galtieri about this, and he said, really, he indicated, I think, what has been coming out from other sources, that there has been some slight movement in the Argentine position. He himself talks about sovereignty as an objective of the negotiations now, not as a precondition. But on the other hand, he hasn't dropped sovereignty. There's no question that they are going to hand back voluntarily the islands to the British, or whatever else Mrs. Thatcher may imagine as being her objective in these negotiations. Personally, I think the progress, there's been a little progress, but really not very much.
So it looks as if the British on the islands could expect things like what you have just experienced.
Well, that is precisely the question that I put to President Galtieri as the last question in the interview, because at the end of the interview, while the camera bulbs were popping, he shook me very warmly by the hand, congratulated me, for what reason I do not know, on the interview and everything else.
Still alive.
Indeed. Yes, he wasn't congratulating me on that. And I asked him at that point whether he could give us any assurance that the people who were on the islands, the British islanders, whether or not they could expect to live through the same kind of nightmare that I just lived through if they had to live under Argentine rule. And he lifted his hand like that and said, I swear it.